Hi, welcome back to another exciting Serger Tip Clip. Today I'd like to talk to you about specialty threads for decorative edges. And I especially want to talk to you about how different threads look even with the same settings. So I stitched off a bunch of samples and we're going to go over them and I'll show you which threads I used and how different they can look all with the same settings. For this tip clip, I took a long strip of a fairly hefty woven fabric and doubled it over. It's a double thickness. And I stitched off using 10 different threads. And the thing that I kept the same was all of the settings on my serger remained constant. But by changing out the different threads, I wanted to illustrate how different a stitch can look with different thread, even though the settings are the same. And the reason behind that is to never take for granted that a stitch will look exactly the same from one thread to another. So let's start looking at some of these and I'll tell you what I use for the threads. One of the many reasons that I love sergers so much is that there are a almost infinite number of decorative threads available that you can use on them. But that being said, I always like to mention that not all sergers are created equal. Some sergers work well with almost any possible decorative thread that you can put your hands on, and other sergers might only work well with certain threads. So when it comes to experimentation, it never hurts to at least try a thread in your serger. But if you don't get a good result with it, find the threads that do work well for decorative purposes and stick with those. Okay, the first one I did was with regular serger cone thread. You can see there's lots of space between the stitches, lots of serger stubble on the edges, those little pokies. And again, if I were doing this for a decorative edge, that wouldn't be my choice for stitch length. The next thread I use is jean stitch thread, which is 100% polyester. And clearly it's thicker. You can see a little bit more coverage, but again, I see some serger stubble on the edges, so I would shorten that stitch up for a decorative edge for full coverage again. This next thread is Pearl Crown Rayon. It has a little more sheen than the jean stitch thread, but the coverage is pretty similar. This next thread is an acrylic yarn, and you can see a significant difference in the density. We're starting to get much fuller coverage. The stitches look much closer together, and it's all a function of the thicker yarn type of thread that I'm using in that upper looper. I don't have the label for this particular thread, but I believe it's a cotton yarn type of thread, much thicker, and again, very beautiful coverage on the edge. The variegated colors are, I think, just gorgeous, and I like this stitch length for this particular thread for full coverage on that edge. This is Quilt Highlights Rayon Braid, and it's like almost like a floss, and I just think it's gorgeous, and I think the sheen on it is spectacular. It's very beautiful. Gives very nice coverage, went through the machine very nicely, and I just think that the edging using this is stunning. This next one is Candlelight, and this is a metallic thread, and I don't know whether you can pick it up with the camera, but it's got a much coarser texture to it. It's pretty thick, and if you're looking for something for evening wear or something like that, this is very pretty. I've used this a lot, but I would say that it tends to be a tiny bit scratchier, so if it's against your skin, you might want to take that into consideration. Up next is a metallic embroidery thread, and I did this right next to the Candlelight just for comparison. It's very fine thread. You can see a lot of serger stubble, a lot of space between the threads. So again, there's a considerable difference in the embroidery versus the Candlelight metallic threads. The next thread is something entirely different. It's woolly nylon. Woolly nylon is a great thread to use for a lot of different purposes. This set on 2.5 gives some coverage. I would have shortened up that stitch considerably. It makes a fabulous rolled hem edge on napkins and things. And you can see how soft and fluffy the thread is, so it's not scratchy at all against the skin. But the thing to keep in mind is the fact that this is a nylon thread, so that when you're pressing, you want to be careful of the temperature of your iron when you're using it. This is woolly nylon extra, and I believe it's only made in black and white, and it's a thicker version of the previous one, the other woolly nylon. And again, you can see that the stitching is much denser, very full coverage on the edges, and just beautiful. I love this, and I wish they had it in tons of different colors, but I believe it's only made in the black and white now. This is Sulky's 12-weight cotton quilting thread, and I've used this on quite a few different projects. Again, I'd shorten up that stitch for slightly better coverage, but it's pretty darn good right there. And these come in a ton of different colors, solid as well as variegated. And this particular thread seems to work well in all makes and models of sergers. And last but not least, this is Madiera's Decora thread. I just think this is fabulous looking. When I've used this with a cover stitch, it almost looks like snakeskin. And you can see incredible edge coverage, just beautiful. And it's got a very, very nice sheen to it. It is heavier. You'd have to experiment to make sure this goes through your serger comfortably. You don't want to overstrain your serger. But a wonderful choice. What I showed you today is just the tip of the iceberg with decorative threads. There are a gazillion of them available, and so many of them are beautiful. It's well worth exploring the possibilities and checking them out. One thing that I would highly recommend, though, with these specialty threads is to keep your samples in your sample binder, a 3-ring binder with plastic page protectors. Just mark your stitch settings, your tensions, all of the information that we've gone over in previous tip clips. And I think that it will give you a very pretty reference and a good one for knowing what you want for a look on your stitches. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you again soon for another Serger Tip Clip.